This video is a response to an email I received, even though the individual solved their own problem. Kind of reminded me that I should make some of the videos that I said I was going to. So this video is going to be, I believe, part 2 in a series of bathroom wood floor repair, structural wood floor repair. So here we have the bathroom, the framing, toilet, sink, tub. Let's remove the wall so we can get a better view of what we're looking at. Might as well get rid of the tub. There's the damage right there. There's the culprit. And you're going to see a lot of damage around the drain area. And I don't really have a hole. A lot of times you're going to have a pre-cut hole in the plywood where the drain goes into the subflooring and takes it away to the sewer or the septic tank. Now, this particular situation here, I drew it so that I could answer 2 questions. Basically, if we have damage going to the wall, not underneath the wall, that I'm going to try and cover in another video. I promise I'll cover it. If not, remind me and then I'll cover it. And then I put the damage up against the wall and I put it away from the wall a little bit. Now, if you have damage where it's away from the wall a little bit, this is going to work out pretty good because you're going to be able to cut the plywood and use this to connect the plywood to connect it together. When we cut out a space with the to remove the damage, now obviously the damage is already creating a problem and weakening the plywood, but the plywood flooring and subflooring, whatever material it is designed to create some type of a box, let's say, a structural component, and it's used to strengthen the building. Once we start weakening it by removing, by realistically cutting up against the wall, I mean, let's just say that we had to remove a big chunk here, a square from about here to here, all the way to here. And then we're weakening the building a little bit. The larger that square, the weaker the building is going to be. But of course, at the same time, this would also allow you to replace the damage with full sheets of plywood, which is going to help also. So we need to connect the plywood or the subflooring together, kind of like stitch it up, like stitching up a damaged piece of clothing. We need to connect the pieces together. That's going to be the main thing. And of course, the thing you're going to need to keep in mind when you're making this type of a repair. Here we have cut the hole in the floor, and as you can see, we don't have a lip like we have on this side over here. And again, this is the reason why I'm providing you with 2 different examples here, because you are going to run into problems where you're just going to have a lip. This is all going to be damaged plywood. You're not going to be able to reuse it. And if you are trying to reuse the damaged plywood, you go in and drive a nail into it and it's rotted, then you're not really doing anything. And again, you are going to come into situations where this whole area is going to be rotted. The joists, the plates, the framing, that's going to be another video. So this would be just for subflooring damage. So I'm going to run through, created a couple of scenes here to give you some better views of it. There you go, going off to the side. And you can see now you can always cut it back to the next joist too if you want. But to me, keep it minimal if possible. If this area is not damaged, why cut it out? But it is going to be an option to make the repairs. And a lot of times that'll happen when you're just a little off. Let's say you go and you cut the damage out and you're only an inch away from the floor joist, and you can use it as one of your blocks or to connect the 2 pieces together, then of course that's something you might consider doing. Now here's an old patch right there, or that we did in the previous video, and I will try and put a link in right here so that you can go back and look at that if you need to. And this is the underside, obviously. We flipped under. give you a better view. Just trying to give you a view, cover every angle I can here. So there we go. There we are. So that's what it would look like after you cut your hole out for something like this. Like I said, if this floor joist right here was over here, it was about an inch away, then why not just cut it back a little bit further, and that way you can use the floor joist as a framing member to make the tie between the structural connection, structural tie, to strengthen the plywood. Because now, since you have the hole here, you have created a weak point between this side and this side and this side and this side, and that's not what we want. Here's another way you can fix something like this. Put a couple of 2x6 blocks in here. This block right here wouldn't be necessary. I just threw it in there. Sometimes we need to beef things up. And it actually would be necessary if you were making a connection from here to here also. But again, you could always put blocks in that would be perpendicular to this one on each side and fasten them to the plywood. Now, I know I said that you shouldn't use screws, but something like this, you can actually drive a screw in the center, leave it sticking up about an inch, inch and a half, and then use it as something to grab onto, especially in a situation like this where you're not going to be able to reach your hand around the joist. For something like this, you could actually hold it and then use your screws or nails to attach it to the subflooring. Something like this and something like, well, this obviously you'd be able to grab onto. Something like this you really wouldn't be able to. You got the floor joist in the way. Drive a screw in, hold it with one hand while you're screwing the other screws in around it or nailing the other nails in. Now, I did say that it's going to be better to use nails for structural repairs, and that is probably going to stand true with most structural engineers, but you could always drive a couple of screws in and then nail the block and then pull the screws out. I've done that before also. Let's just go ahead and take a look at the bottom of it, give you an idea what happened. Now, you could always make these blocks longer to provide you with a better structural connection. But don't forget, most tubs are only about 29 inches wide. You're not going to be able to put too big of a block in there. And that is the last view for this. Like I said, this is about the simplest way to fix something like this, even though this might not be something a structural engineer would approve. Here's something else you can do if you need a little support, a little more support. If you were to put some flat blocks in, let's say that some of the subflooring might be a little too weak, might be rotted, and you're still having a problem driving a nail into it. Or keeping the board up. You know, it's not going to do you any good to drive a bunch of screws in the rotted wood and then put the new piece of plywood in to make the repair, and then this is weak. You put any pressure on it, you're just going to push it right through the floor. So you might need to do something like this where you put some blocks in. And again, I'm just throwing out some different ideas there to provide you with as many options as you can. Sometimes there's these options that a lot of people can't figure out or they've never seen before, and that's kind of just why I'm throwing them out there. So that's it for that. These blocks can be used in a different way. You could always, put a block underneath here, nail it from joist to joist, do something similar over here. But if you're going to do that, then why not just put a block and use it for the subflooring to make your connection. So just throwing that out there. This is probably going to be the best way to fix something like this as far as a structural engineer is concerned. They're going to want you to block the perimeter, and I'm going to go through a step-by-step process here to give you an example of what you would be doing. So basically you're going to use a block, and these blocks you'll be able to nail down into the subflooring on each side to get a nice tie in here. You can always use bigger blocks. I have 2x6 blocks here with 2x6 joists. If you have 2x8 joists, you can always use 2x6 blocks on it also, and I would imagine a 2x4 would be fine. But If you need a little more nailing, then you could always get some 3x6 or some 4x6. And that's something an engineer would love to see, by the way, some nice thick blocks in there, especially for this side over here. And you could always, if you have 2x6, you could use the blocks and put them on top of the foundation plates here, or the sill plates, and then that's really going to make them happy. Let's go ahead and take a look at the underside here. And here you can see we have a block that's going here. Now, something like this is going to be difficult to do if you can't access the bottom of the crawl space area. And this usually happens if the crawl space areas aren't deep enough. You know, I've seen them before where they're like 8 inches deep. You're not going to be able to get in there. And if you're not going to be able to get your hand around it, then you might want to go with the last presentation I'm going to have here, which will be the flat 2x6s, which to me would be acceptable and probably work just fine, but might not be accepted by a structural engineer. Here's the second block that has been installed, and it should line up with the other block so that it works for the plywood, or the subflooring, I should say. So it'd be something like this. If you're using a 2x6, then you're going to want to have 3/4 of an inch on each side. And I believe they do have a minimum. I want to say it's a 1/2 inch minimum that you can have. So try and get this line as straight as you can when you cut it. If this line is kind of wiggly, then that's when it might not be a bad idea to use a 3x6, a 3x4, or even a 4x4, something that's going to give you a little more room to nail the sheathing to make the connection. So if you got a little angled stuff here, and you can always move these blocks. If this is angled and you got to move the blocks, these don't need to line up. You just need to make sure that you have the minimum required nailing, which I believe is a 1/2 inch on these. So like I said, if you don't have a straight line and you got some damage, you might want to go with a thicker block for this. Here we have the rest of the blocks. These were our first 2 blocks that we attached. This one was the first one, second one. Then you could attach these 2 blocks and then put the blocks that go in between the other blocks. And this is probably what most structural engineers are going to want to see, something like this. Or that's what they're going to call out for a repair. It's the most common way. And again, you can see right here, goes all the way around. You've got, just make sure you have the minimum, like I said in the previous video, the minimum spacing, which I believe is a 1/2 inch. And something like this is ready to go. Cut a piece of plywood or subflooring, whatever you're going to be using, and nail it. And a lot of times it's going to be required 6 inches spacing between nails as the minimum. And I do not recommend spacing the nails any closer than 4 inches, because sometimes the structural engineers will consider that too many nails and it weakens the structure. So if you were to drive a bunch of nails, if you drove them in 2 inches on center, let's say, into a 2x4 on each side, this side of the plywood and this side when you put your new plywood on, then it could actually split, create enough, it would be like driving a wedge in. Each nail, that when they line up that close together, can actually split the block here, and you'll lose all of your lateral shear transfer, I guess would be the word that I'd be looking for. So something like this, nail the perimeter, 6 inches minimum on center, I should say, maximum 6 inches, no closer than 4 inches. And then for something like this, you could always drive larger nails, 16D nails, something like that. Maybe put 3 of them in here, again 6 inches on center. If you want to put a couple of screws in, I don't know. I'm just kind of throwing it out there, and you should be done, ready to go. That's the end of this video, and if it helps, go ahead and hit the old thumbs up button. Before you leave, don't forget to check out our money-saving discounted home book packages at gregvan.com. homeowners, builders, and contractors. Check them out. Don't forget, if you're a contractor, to check out our book, 501 Contractor Tips also.